Hello there everyone, I'm Vale, and today I'll be reviewing the Vale of Dorwinion, the land of the wine, with the leader Vine Regent Hawin. Interesting. This is on, of course, the Third Age Divide and Conquer mod. So in terms of position, Dorwinion actually starts with these three settlements that you're watching right there. They're fairly close to each other, so you can defend them fairly easily, of course. Two of them are pretty good ones, the capital and, of course, the Dorwinion castle. In terms of enemies nearby, you do have a very difficult enemy nearby, really close, with Rune here. That should be the most preeminent issue right there, because Rune is so close to you, immediately on your border, that war is inevitable with them. The second enemy, or the second major enemy, is close. Mortar will certainly come around and start poking around your lands and your close whereabouts. So you do have some troubles. Will have some troubles once you dispatch Rune. If you don't dispatch it early on, then you'll have even more trouble. In terms of the objectives and the difficulty of them, so 40 regions, and you have to destroy the Rune and Shadow of Mordor, and you have to include a couple of cities from Rune as well. Nothing too fancy. It's fairly a medium conquest or time to victory, actually, considering all that you have to put through. Of course, it's a medium victory or victory objectives, but you do have to rely that Mordor doesn't conquer Gondor easily, so that you don't have to face a huge Mordor in the end. In terms of initial conquests, tricky situation. Land grabs are only far away from the enemy on this area of the map, so you'll have some troubles if Rune decides to attack you early. Of course, you can go immediately into Rune, that is your choice, but for that, do be very careful if you can withstand long periods of war with Rune, of course. In terms of diplomacy, you do have some good things on your side. You're allied with Dale and Thranduil's realm, so pretty much allied with everyone that matters on this side. You won't have too many problems. If you get an alliance with the dwarves, then you can focus solely on Rune for a long time. Of course, as you've seen there, you don't start with Rune as an enemy. They are neutral. They're not at war with you. So any diplomacy that you can get with Rune is also a good one. In terms of paths to victory, well, mainly run. Mainly Rune. Rune is not an option unless you can ally with it for a couple of turns, but certainly you're not going to start going for Mordor before you conquer Rune. Now let's check a little bit of the unit roster for the Vale of Dorwinion. In this case, we do have a very powerful army roster. Even the initial units are good. I would say that Thorn, you can divide them into Thorn units and Avari units. You know, Thorn units being the basic initial units, without counting, the peasants. So you have Thorn Bladesmen, Thorn Guard. You have some hang on, where are the other ones? Thorn Crossbowmen, which are really good, and they can use sharpened stakes. And of course, you do have some Thorn Riders. So you have one of each unit type on the Thorn, let's say, idea. Then you have the Avari Pikemen, the Avari Guard, the Avari Wanderers, and you even have some Avari Archers. All of them are pretty much about the heaviest unit on that side. So, with the introduction of the Avari, Dorwinion actually have some quite decent elite units on their roster. You can check that they have plenty of anti-cavalry options right here, especially, well, let me check. I'm checking exactly the three units that don't get any bonuses against it. So you have the Thorn Guard here, you have the Spear Guard here, you have the Avari Pikemen, so pretty much you will have some units to defend against the cavalry, of course. You don't have any anti-armor at all. Even your axes are not good against anti-armor, so that is a little bit of a weakness on this composition. In terms of units, as we've seen the army composition and the army roster, we now get to see the replenishment rate and the number of units that you'll be able to field. You have a good rate of replenishment for the initial troops. The Thorn Guard and the Thorn Bladesmen don't take too long to build up. Also the Vineyard Shield Bearers and the Vineyard Bowmen don't take too much to replenish. That's actually one of the best rate of replenishment. However, as you've probably checked it out, the Avari Wanderers, for instance, take 34 turns. That's about the same as a troll unit. So, good rate of replenish for initial troops, and a late game ones will take some time to build, have a bad rate of replenishment. In terms of upkeep, well, most units are fairly expensive, but you have a kind of a low upkeep for the early game units, as you can see here. Of course, even Thorn Crossbowmen, compared to this unit, they have a very good upkeep rate. So I would consider this as a good upkeep rate. You know, of course, elite units will always be expensive, but at least the initial ones are not as much. In terms of compositions, I would go with many infantry and archer types, and some decent cavalry to support as soon as you can. You can get a couple of Thorn Riders. Since you do start with a couple of good units right there on this Avadi Guard and stuff, I would recommend you using them to the best effectiveness. So your early army should have a couple of elite units, some infantry and archetypes, and you should recruit some cavalry to support them. In terms of buildings, well, pretty much you will have the same problem as other factions, where you have to build a lot of buildings to hit your best units. Although you can have them on pretty much the wooden castle, the Thorn units are pretty good, and the practice range right there. You will still require a lot of buildings to be effective on that regard. Of course, there's some good things to this, because you don't have any special buildings, but you have a good trade-off. You have a lot of ports, a lot of roads, and some communal farming, which also has the advantage of bearing your vineyard units. So overall, I would give them a positive stance on the buildings, because they're fairly useful on the beginning, and also you have some good mines here on Karasvalatrin. Build them immediately to reap their rewards as fast as possible. In terms of cost and or time spent and the reward that you get, you have a very good ratio, because of course most of your buildings will provide you with excellent units or with some decent stuff to begin with, some trade, some income, of course. Other than that, you start with some good finances, and you can get better with trade. So I would definitely use some diplomats to get some trades, especially with your allies as well, because they're fairly close. Overall, you have a good relation with military. Most unit types can be produced in both settlement types, so you should abuse that and don't be too worried about losing a couple of units. You can always replenish them fairly easily. In terms of agents, you don't start with any agents. Now, due to the conditions of your victory, you won't need too many spies. One will check out everything from Rune on your border, and you will need a second one for the northern border. Pretty much that would be it for the initial engagements. Of course, you would need a lot of diplomats. I would consider diplomats as the choice in terms of agents for this faction, because you will only need to get a lot of trades and map information and some gold, some welcome gold with all the other factions. I would use diplomats to go for trade agreements and to go west and southwest for the maximum efficiency. In terms of assassins, actually, I would go with some assassination of Rune's generals for the for an easier beginning, I would say. No point sabotaging any structures if you can get the generals right away. I think Rune doesn't bear a chance with your units unless they have their generals with them. Resume now the Vale of Dorwinion. Their strong points. They have good initial generals, which I hadn't talked about. 4 initial great generals right there. They have many unit options, and it's pretty much a straightforward campaign. You know, conquer Rune and conquer Mordor. The weak points, well, of course, it starts right next to Rune, so careful positioning will be required initially, and be careful with spending too much time on some land grab. The initial land grab will be a little bit of a risk, so be careful with that. The path to victory is also a weaker point, because, well, pretty much we have one path to victory, getting Rune early and then going against Mordor. Betraying your allies, I wouldn't recommend. You know, I'm always considering the weak points or strong points. I'm always considering, in terms of victory objectives, what they ask of you, not what your choices are, of course. In terms of generals, I already told you that they are quite some very good generals. Every single general that you start with is actually very good. Even Divine Lord 3 stars is a pretty decent general, and you'll probably get a couple of conquests with him. I hadn't mentioned that you also have some Privateer Cavalry and Privateer X-Men, which you should always get. And this is one thing that I should notice, because they're effective against armor. You can counter the effect that you don't have any effectiveness against armor with these mercenaries. So get them as soon as you can and as often as you can. There's a building unit synergy, rush, tech options. I would say they have um, a good rush option, and you have some pretty decent unit and building synergy options, because you can get, you know, you can be improving your farmland and getting some units out of that. But still, I would say that they have weaker tech options because Rune is so close, pretty much. Time to victory, I would say medium long, since it's, you know, Rune and Mordor, they will be a pain. But if you can get Rune pretty fast, then it will be a fast campaign. Overall, this is a very interesting faction for a small challenge, very similar to Dale on what Moss was, and it's a very balanced, straightforward campaign. Certainly one of the best campaigns to start with on this mod, and especially since, you know, you're the Vale of Dorwinion, it's a new faction, it's one of the most interesting. I definitely recommend it. 5 stars on my overall idea. Cheers!